Hello and welcome back to the channel, to another of my interview series. And today, as you can see, I have a fellow guest in the studio. I have Andy Thomas, who, according to the website here, says that he is one of Britain's most prolific authors and lecturers on the mysteries and histories. His work on truth issues, unexplained mysteries and global cover-ups is world-renowned. Well, we're going to find out about that in the show. Andy, welcome along.
Nice to be here.
Now, I know you said to me, I don't live too far from you, so I'm going to come and gate crash in on the show, which is great because very often we've got people on Zoom and it can sometimes fade in and fade out or freeze like that. Yes. And so it's nice to have somebody else in the studio. And actually, you made me think, if I could get more people in the studio, I could set it up a bit more like Redacted. Do you ever watch Redacted?
I have seen it, yes.
And their
yes,
studio is, you know, there's just the two of them and another guy remotely. So I might have to do that. Anyway, Andy, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Happy to be part of a dummy run then for the future.
Yes.
See
well,
what we can do.
Hopefully we're not any dummies at all. So
some might argue otherwise.
Some might argue. No, I'm very excited. So you've given me your new book, the new Heretics, and I feel I'm probably one of the new heretics, actually.
Definitely, yes. You are very definitely a heretic.
Having an opinion and for speaking out a bit.
Yes.
And that's really what we're sort of getting into. But before we go any further, there's one little revelation, and it shows you how swamped I get with emails where I can't always join the dots. Andy's just told me that he is the same Andy, and I should have twigged this, who's booked me to speak at the Glastonbury Symposium in July, which I'm very excited to come along, and I can't remember the exact date now.
I can tell you when. Well, you're on the Sunday the 30th of July, and I mean, the symposium's been running 33 years, incredibly now, and we have lots of very interesting people like yourself, and we are there to keep freedom of expression alive. And to keep people talking about things that the rest of the world thinks we shouldn't talk about, but we like to talk about them.
Yes.
You know, within reasonable boundaries. We're really looking forward to joining you. If anybody wants to come, Glastonbury, it's the last weekend of July this year, and it's an amazing place to be anyway, just because you're in Glastonbury. But equally, we create a cocoon for the weekend where you can come in and be yourself and gather with like-minded individuals and not feel weird, because we're all weird and it's all right in there.
Well, we had Sandy Adams on the show the other day, and she was talking about the town council meeting in which she just guested in and was originally only going to speak for 3 minutes. Somebody else had already spoken about the things that she wanted to talk about. So she launched into the Agenda 21 conversation, and that video has gone all around the world, apparently, and caused quite a storm.
Sandy is a really fascinating character. In fact, during the COVID years, she spoke for one of our online Glastonbury symposiums, and she was fantastic. She's got views that should be heard. Even if you don't agree with her, we should hear them. Yeah. Because a lot of people agree with her, and she's done very well there. She got a moment in the sun, and probably not a normal town council meeting.
The amount of emails I got from people who didn't know that I'd already done an interview with her that said, Richard, you've got to get that woman that spoke up. And then they keep sending me the link. And it's like, yeah, we've already done that, but I'm happy to do it again. So we had her on the other day. So, we're talking about that thing about trying to speak out, and people don't always want you to have an opinion if it's not the state narrative.
Yes. I mean, it's an old trick, I know, but it's particularly strong now. So especially since the pandemic, let's call it that. There was suddenly an understanding that people who'd previously been just eccentrics that you could sort of ignore and sideline suddenly were finding a voice, and of course were becoming therefore dangerous. Now, there are people in high places that clearly, genuinely believed that we were dangerous if we were encouraging people not to follow health advice, and that's how they saw it. But that's crept. So they then started to think we need to restrict that view, and now anything that doesn't fit, as you say, the state narrative, you're taken offline, your video's taken down, your shadow banned. In other words, they don't officially ban you, but you might find your video doesn't get sent around anywhere, your social media posts don't reach the people they should do, and you fall off of search engines. Which is a massive issue.
What's quite interesting there, Andy, is just before we started the show, we were just talking about Wikipedia. And when you booked me, there was an interesting. Well, you tell the story. How did that come about? A comment related that I had said.
So yes, Wikipedia is a strange beast, of course. It's a law unto itself, and your page had been changed by somebody to say you were a self-confessed racist.
Self-confessed.
Self-confessed. Yes, it's very boldly out there.
How many people do you think would say, "Oh yes, I am a self-confessed racist"? And I mean, I can't imagine that many people who have a public profile would dare to say that. Even if they were, why would you say that and bring attention on yourself?
You wouldn't say that, would you? No, listen, racism's a horrible thing. And you clearly aren't.
Well, I try not to be.
The good news, but somebody thought you were.
Yes.
So they put that up there, and then that changed and it vanished. And it went back to just normal references to your work that you'd done. And then we just looked today, didn't we?
We just looked today.
And as of today, the page is gone completely.
I'm gone.
So you've been erased from history.
And some people may not know that in the mid-90s, I had a children's television series, which was my idea, and I set it up with a friend of mine, and we sold it to ITV, and it went off in 96 and 97. And that has its own Wikipedia page, which I didn't even know about, to be honest. We looked at that, and you said, "Oh, well, you should be able to get to your page if you click as one of the artists involved in the programme." Well, my friend's he's got his name and a link, and the little girl, who's now a woman in her 30s, has a link to it to say who she is. And there's just my name greyed out, or not greyed out, but no link anywhere associated with me. So I'm off Wikipedia, and actually I take that as a badge of honour now.
Well, it might be, because clearly somebody's decided that you're dangerous enough, they don't want you to be out there. Because, of course, you're putting these shows out, lots of people are seeing them, raising really important conversations, and, of course, they don't want that. And it's a terrible word, isn't it? I know it's a lazy conspiracy term, but there are clearly tiers of power out there that do not want people questioning orthodoxy of any kind.
Yes.
And, that's something, lots of us are very concerned about, but I'm trying to raise awareness of that, because what a lot of people don't realise is that outside of our circles, many people don't know this is happening.
Yes.
Unless you know that information was there in the first place, you might not know that it's gone.
Exactly.
And you don't understand the levels of persecution that are now currently happening. And that's frightening.
So just tell us then a little bit of a background about yourself and how you got into the conspiracy zone.
I know. So I began really as a paranormal research.
Right.
And I've always been interested in things like crop circles, UFOs. That's where it began for me. And by the way, think what you want about either of those. There are many things that are not explained. Right? End of the story. Beyond that, you can choose what you think is your truth. But we should be allowed to discuss them and share information. I realised very quickly that, especially crop circles, whether you think they're alien-made, man-made, psychic-made, put all that aside, they were not being accurately represented in the mainstream media. They were telling active lies about them, and I knew by then.
So what were they saying about them?
Well, I mean, I'll give you just one classic example, and then you could just say this is bad research, but QI, comedy show, Stephen Fry, all the rest of it. A question came up about crop circles, and Stephen Fry insisted that they had all been invented by Doug and Dave, the two elderly pensioners who in 1991 claimed that they had made all of the crop circles ever, and it had all begun in the 1980s. Well, he stated that as a fact. And then I think it was one of the other ones, the Jonathan Creek guy.
Oh, yeah.
Alan Davis.
Alan Davis.
He said, I'm not sure that actually that's correct, but then he kind of got cut off. No, it is correct. But he isn't correct. There are records of crop circles going back at least to the 1600s.
Really?
You've got photographs going back to the 1930s. So, right, think what you want about where they came from. It is not a modern prank, and it was not invented by two elderly gentlemen in the 1980s. So it goes back earlier than that. So that's just one example. But
and
I've
farmers,
heard
presumably
things from
farmers would know more than anybody else if there were crops, they may not have had means of communication. I'm going back to sort of say 200-300 years ago. If it goes back to the 1600s, like you said, then there must have been some farmers coming out onto their farm going, "Oh, hello, what's this?" But they probably couldn't appreciate from above because farmers didn't have balloons
unless you
or
had
cameras.
downland. I mean, if you stand on a hill, you can often get a really good view of the crop circle. You're absolutely
You've
right.
just crushed my theory.
Oh, sorry. But look, there's about 300 historical accounts of crop circles.
Right.
And, there's a lot of information out there. Look it up.
And presumably people would be sketching them if they, as you say, on a hill. I'm just thinking at the old sort of etches somewhere, there must be somebody who's interested that they've collected sort of from the 1700s. You used to get these people who draw the tombs and megalithic sites and things. There must be somebody who's gone...
Well, the key drawn evidence is from the 1600s. So there's a picture of the devil making the circle in the field from 1678. And then just a few years later, you get Sir Robert Plot writing in his book, The Natural History of Staffordshire. And he shows not only crop rings, but also squares and other shapes. And he believed, and in a way he was ahead of his time in this regard, that atmospheric phenomena was creating them.
Right.
So, that was back, hundreds of years ago. So it just makes the point that there's much more to this than meets the eye. And what I realised, the more I researched crop circles, the more I realised they were just being misrepresented. And then, of course, you think, well, hang on, if this is being misrepresented, what else is being misrepresented? And then you meet other people involved in that world who are looking into other cover-ups, conspiracies, yes, that word. And you think, actually, this must go bigger. And so before I knew it, I got kind of sucked down that rabbit hole. But I'm actually very happy that I did. And I realised, right, there's a whole other world out there of mysteries and cover-ups that we just are not supposed to talk about. And of course, you can always be sure when you're not meant to talk about something, there is something worth talking about.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I started the channel, when I was just questioning really and truly what was going on with the government, and my sort of interest was quite limited at that time. And we're only talking back in November. And prior to that, long-term viewers will know, or people who've looked at my channel will know that mostly I was talking about heritage, landscape and nature, wandering around the countryside and trying to sort of big up England and Englishness and all of that, which, because it's my country and I love it very much and I'm very proud of it. And I wasn't keen on this, this for the last 10, 20 years, this sort of woke agenda of trying to sort of make out that England was not worthy of anything and all of that. So I was very much onto that. But I at first was just talking about the government, and I soon realised from the comments and then the emails, my spectrum was being widened to people like the WEF and all these nefarious people that are out there doing and advising and sort of pulling the strings and all of that. And then from there, it's gone even wider into the spiritual, into the bird flu thing, and then the UFO thing, and the fake UFO thing, and the possibility of a real UFO thing. And in the space of 3 or 4 months, it can be quite a lot to take in. Whereas somebody like you who's been doing it for how long did you say? 20 odd years?
More than that, I'm afraid. Yeah, so now I'm 32 years in of doing stuff like this. Yeah, I mean, you dived in the deep end, but it's interesting to do it like that because suddenly you were aware of what was out there, all the interest and all the opposition you were going to meet for daring to go into those realms. I kind of found that gradually and got used to being treated as a nutcase. And it was very good training, by the way. And then, because in the end you think, well, hang on, madness is very subjective. And actually, I'm going to stand by my ground and gather the evidence. And I think I've done enough of that to realise we're not mad for believing in unusual things. And we're not wrong to say, actually, we should be allowed to express this without somebody else trying to close us down. And that's the difference. So now, we were eccentrics. Now we're dangerous.
Now we're dangerous,
especially after the US Capitol invasion, of course. And I write about this in the new Heretics book. Up to that point, you could sort of dismiss people that question and make a fuss and believe in conspiracy theories as, you just don't worry about them, they're all nutters. That changed things because suddenly it was like, and now you might be a potential insurrectionist as well. And that changed things. And even at talks, I found, because I give a lot of talks to very normal, everyday folk, and you have to kind of sugar the pill a little bit, but you try and get the conversations going. I have more people saying, well, don't you think by talking about all this kind of thing that you're risking more events like the US Capitol invasion? And it was like, whoa, real pushback. And I think that's been used as a way to close people down even more.
So tell us a little bit, for those that aren't familiar, the US Capitol invasion. What's that about?
Well, As anybody might like to recall, back in 2 years ago now, wasn't it? The beginning of 2021, of course, Donald Trump officially lost the election. Lots of people out there think that he didn't. Now, I don't know, I'm not a statistical expert, but listen, lots of people didn't think that he had. And then, by various encouragements, of course, they all descended on Washington, D.C. and managed to get into the building.
This on the 6th of January, is this the...
It was the 6th of January. And so that, obviously, it was a big deal, and people got hurt, and there were unpleasant scenes, and people died. So it wasn't so great. But the thing is, that didn't mean that event represented everybody that questions orthodoxy. But it was used by the mainstream media to say that. And then especially after those that questioned, the pandemic and the vaccine and all of that, it was like, well, that was just one more thing. And where suddenly now we had to be stopped. I say we, that's a very broad church. There's lots of people that might not agree with each other in certain areas, but they all agree you should be able to question without being taken offline, without being vilified. But we're on a fast track at the moment to what clearly seems to be an agenda to remove us from public view. Anything, however legitimate, that questions, the standard text, as it were, you're not allowed to. And the hope would seem to be that go another 20, 30 years' time, that we won't be able to be found online. People will, hopefully, they think, stop looking for it. They'll forget that this kind of material even existed. And that's why those of us that are trying to talk about it, we have to keep these conversations alive now.
Yes.
Before that happens, because I don't want that to happen.
And it's interesting because I'm a great believer, although you wouldn't think it from everything you see. Well, maybe from that I'm a great believer in analog, because analog is a solid, real thing. Like writing a real book and printing it off. It's there, and having printed it onto paper, you can't change it. Whereas an electric version of this can be, and we've seen that with so much of even Enid Blyton books, and Roald Dahl. I was just trying to think, and they're already editing and doing reprints, which is why I think old books, and I have, modest collection of old books of all sorts of different things, a lot of history and a lot of landscape, heritage and nature from my previous direction of the channel. But that's why I think those things are so important, because you can get rid of podcasts and videos. YouTube could go down, or my channel could disappear. Now, it would be difficult for me to put all of this onto celluloid and go around little villages' halls and project it. But in a way, the analog world is a great way to circumvent a lot of deletion, isn't it? Or editorial.
For a while. Obviously, in the end, tapes will crumble, celluloid will crumble. Even paper. They reckon the kind of books that we print today, they use a very acid print. They'll probably all disintegrate in less than 100 years. So there we go. We'll find that out eventually.
Yes.
However, nonetheless, if a book's preserved properly, if something recording it, there's something to that. The digital world is so editable, and people don't realise this. So a big search engine like Google now will often, maybe they think they're doing the right thing, they'll take stuff down and you won't find it in that search anymore. And a lot of mainstream search engines now, nearly 50% of what's out there you will not find on those search engines.
Yes.
Now that is so wrong in so many ways, and even if they think they're doing the right thing, nobody's asked us, there's been no public conversation about that, and that's a very dangerous state of affairs.
Going to, now you say, I'm going to put my name, I haven't done this for a long time actually, I'm going to put my name, hang on, let's just share the thing. I should put my name into Google.
This could be dangerous.
And see if any of my stuff comes up. Let's just move that over a bit.
It's looking good.
So my YouTube channel is still at the top. My Vobes.com webpage, which I don't actually do very much with, vobes.co.uk. My main webpage these days is richardvobes.com. That hasn't come up, but that's only quite new. Comedy, Facebook, the old Bald Explorer.
Obviously, look, if they removed you completely, it would be too obvious, wouldn't it? And I think they're a little bit more subtle than that. And that's where you get like shadow banning. which is where, as I said earlier, they don't officially ban you, but you'll find your stuff only trickles out there, or your
Yes.
followers don't see it very often. You know, it's clever.
I probably
It's
only
clever.
got one follower, only I just feel that I've got a lot more, you know, that it's all just made me feel good. But actually, but then that wouldn't bear out because of all the emails that come in.
Yeah, somebody out there is right. Maybe it's all one person, right?
Yeah, it's all you, isn't it?
It
That's
could
what
be.
it
You
is.
never know, do you? But listen, so the problem is that, so at the moment, you can just about find your way to things, but no, certain subjects you won't. Certainly anything that the authorities see as endangering public health, you're not going to last long online.
So
and
what
then
are-
you wind up in BitChute or Rumble or so on, and you push to the fringes, where the hope would seem to be that the average everyday person won't ever find you there, because
No.
they never think to look in places like that.
Except that, I mean, it's the same with the mainstream media, isn't it? You've got the mainstream media, and sooner or later, people wake up to the fact that the mainstream media have been pushing one agenda, or certain agendas, I should say. And then you go online to find out perhaps a bit more if you're a bit skeptical about what they're saying. And you suddenly realise there's a plethora of stuff on all sorts of different platforms, which hopefully then makes you think, do I trust the mainstream media? And in a way, they've lost you for at least, say, 50%, maybe 70% of what comes in. And you would hope then that also those little satellite platforms, if YouTube is the mainstream of the internet video platforming, and then you know that the terms and conditions make people like me have to edit myself a bit and say, actually, if you want the full story, it's on over here at Rumble, then over time, more and more people will find these independent platforms, and hopefully, you know, it's always going to be smaller than the mainstream, but there is that market. Whereas before, I suppose it was shabby little bookshops down sort of old alleyways that would have a little back room where you could get, you know, oh, look, I've got Andy Thomas's new book. Oh, I should read it. You know, and it'd be very obscure people who would be looking for it. It's certainly widening now, isn't it?
So the hope is, and I think we're a way off this yet, but I think the hope is that all what we call quaintly alternative media at the moment, especially younger people, they're not watching the BBC, they're not watching ITV, they're looking at their own platforms. And that if enough people begin to actually draw their information from the currently alternative platforms, at what point does that actually take over as to where people are getting their source from? So at the moment, there's still a lot of kind of very middle-aged, very sort of righteous people who will still believe the BBC is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But that, I do think, is beginning to shift. So maybe we've got a way to go, but it'll come up the other way, and suddenly they'll be on the back foot one day. The danger we've got, though, and it's something that I've written about, is that we all go into our echo chambers. And then, of course, then we stop listening to what other people think, and that creates polarisation, which is another serious issue of the times, which the new Heretics addresses. It's like, how can we actually have these conversations without polarising? And that goes on within the alternative world as well as getting opposition from outside of it. And we need to be aware of that because, of course, that creates classic divide and rule. Old trick, but still running today.
But yes, well, if it works, why would you change it? And I guess that thing about you get the algorithm starts to work against you because it's not giving you stuff that would surprise you, because it says, you know this, you like this, you love this sort of content. We might occasionally try you with a bit of this, but mostly, you know, this stuff over here, we're not even going to bother to show it to you. And so therefore, as you say, you're in your echo chamber and you're talking to similar minded people.
Yes.
And you're all going, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? Oh, this is terrible. And it might not be as terrible as you might think.
Well, or at least, you know, it's always healthy to hear what somebody else is saying that you don't agree with. I mean, something that I really advocate in the New Heretics is, look, have your opinion, stand by what you believe in, absolutely, but just hear out the opposition so you really know what you're dealing with, not what you think you're dealing with, because it is easy then to demonise the others on the outside and never actually stop to have a nuanced conversation. And just occasionally they might have something to say that is worth hearing.
Yes.
You know, and that's the danger, is that we get more and more upset about being closed down, that our opinions are not going out there. So we get more and more angry, and of course then we become more and more extreme in our attempts to get the word out there, and the next thing we're on the streets with a loud hailer screaming at people that they must believe us. And then of course that enables the mainstream to say, well, look at these nutters. There you go, you see. And they would say that's the problem, that what they're doing by pushing people under the carpet in a way guarantees more extremism. This is the stupid thing. If they don't want that, they should allow people to have a voice and ask even the reasonable questions.
Yes.
But as we've seen with Andrew Bridgen, even an MP now is not allowed to ask the wrong question or you get shut down. So that's the problem.
And I mean, one of the you touched on something there, which is what I tried not to do, and people have commented on it, that I'm more measured than a lot of people in the way I present what I'm presenting. I mean, most of what I present is questions, and then sometimes I come up with some vague sort of thesis or hypothesis of what I think. Like the other day I walked up on the Downs and I said, look, this is what I think is going on, but it's only an opinion and you can disagree with it and shout me down. Everybody's entitled to do that and not take it as gospel, for goodness sake, especially if I don't really know what's going on. But I try to be more, I mean, take this whole scenario, sitting in a studio. It used to be a big master bedroom, and I've taken it quite seriously. But when I go online and watch other truth takers, a lot of them can be extremely passionate and almost aggressive, which if you're new to it and you're questioning and you hear someone going, they're going to come and take us away and there's nothing you can do about it and you've got to do, you think, oh my God, no, I can't cope with that. Even though they may be speaking the truth or they may be, opening you up to a new idea. If you're, my philosophy is, because I've worked in television a bit, is most of them are all quite moderate and they're all sort of quite civilized, even if they're telling you lies, because they become more plausible. And I suppose I emulate that, but on the opposite side of the scale by not, I do have a bit of wacky humour in there as well.
Yeah. No, there's a wisdom to that. And I mean, one of the things that I've written about is that, so we have people that consider themselves coming from totally the right place, soldiers for truth. And you think that's lovely. And certainly there are issues that need to be fought for. But the danger of that is that when you become a soldier for truth, that as with most soldiers, you can become dehumanised. And you forget, actually, you've got to have a little bit of humour, you've got to have a little bit of compassion, and you can become very hard. And, I've kind of been through that phase, and you realise, actually, I don't think all the answers lie there. And then otherwise you do wind up shaking the fist at people, and then they will recoil.
Yes.
So I think your approach is very sensible. And I've admired that in everything I've seen that you put out there. That you've got to keep a bit of a sense of humanity there. Otherwise, the day we lose our humanity, we become the same as the very kind of people we fear are ruling us, who don't seem to have a lot of humanity. If we become the same, they've kind of won, and I'm not going to give them that satisfaction, I think.
No, exactly. And somebody said to me, I did a couple of again, measured and all that in my usual sort of incompetent style, but I did a couple where I'd been a bit more forthright with what I thought was coming. And then every now and again I'll get an email from somebody saying, oh, Richard, please don't scare us, or don't say don't give us too much, because we've come to you for a bit of hope. And I think, yes, but at some point you've got to understand what there is, or at least entertain the idea and then say it's a load of old rubbish. But then somebody else said to me, don't do the devil's work, because there's that thing about they want you frightened, the mysterious they again. Right. They want you frightened. And if they've come off the mainstream media and they're a bit spooked by the sort of things that the mainstream, run on the banks and or the CBDCs are coming in and 15 minutes, or not that they really go into the 15 minutes, all low traffic neighbourhoods, all going to be lovely, and you'll love living in that lovely little prison that we're building for you. But if they get a bit frightened from that and then they go online and equally get frightened, even though they're there really to try and inform themselves, that's the sort of dichotomy that you've got, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, so ruled by fear has long been the equation that we've all been worried about. And there's no question about that. I mean, just stick the mainstream news on. Every single thing in some way makes you afraid.
Yes.
Or depresses you. And, okay, there are difficult things we've got to be honest about and deal with, but it does in the end feel like, hang on, where's the balance to this? But we mustn't fall into that as well. There are things to be worried about, absolutely, and that's why we're all fighting for what we're fighting for, or just trying to get conversations going in our own way. But somewhere within that, we mustn't lose that humanity. We become the very thing that we fear, and we just become all about spreading more fear. You're just kind of feeding into the same issues, and I don't think that's helpful. There's a balance to be struck. You've got to be real about what you're dealing with,
yes,
and you've got to put it on the table and say, look, this is what's going on. But equally, yeah, you have to have a level of optimism. I think that's really important. Sometimes it is hard to have optimism, but you got to forge on and say, but I'm going to try and do this. Have a little bit of a smile on my face occasionally and not walk around depressing people, because the more you depress people, actually the less they're going to listen to you.
And I've seen in comments where people, I've said things and even been light-hearted about it, and people have still said, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it, and they're just sort of like rolling over and letting it happen. And I feel that's such a shame, because they feel it's game over, and they're just waiting. They're waiting to be scooped up and taken to the internment camp or whatever it is. And that is a shame, because we want to motivate people to be standing their ground, remind them that they're sovereign, remind them the power that they have, especially in numbers and like-minded people grouping together and all of that. But just, the individual power, the spiritual power, and all of these things. And so I'm constantly trying to work out each video that I do, how to get over whatever message it is in a way that doesn't frighten off people, but at the same time doesn't frighten off people who don't want to face the truth, but at the same time doesn't lose people who already know it and think I'm being a bit too light about it or not serious enough about it. And it's a difficult tightrope to walk.
You're never going to please everybody anyway, obviously, and you have to be yourself in the end, and all of us have to just do that and do what feels right. But yeah, if you curl up and you roll over, you are actually creating that very scenario you fear of everybody being controlled and useless. And it's so easy to fall into that, but I would suggest stepping out of that and empowering yourself, saying, no, actually, right, I'm going to do one thing. I always say this, and again, in the new Heretics, I put forward things you can do. Do something, rather than just sit there in your armchair complaining and saying the world's terrible. Do something. Choose one thing you can do and fight that fight,
yes,
right? And you're not going to change the whole world all by yourself. That's not even possible. The world's a big place, but you can focus on one thing that will tip the dominoes. And if everybody did that and they chose their one thing they knew that they were good at doing, somewhere it's going to count.
Yeah.
If you don't do anything and you're just sitting there saying what a terrible world we're in, that's actually just making it worse. Fine, if you're going to do that and say, and now I'm going to do that to put it right, great. But if not, the danger is you're actually just deepening the hole.
Yes. I mean, one of my things is now I pay for cash for everything, pretty much everything.
While you can.
Well, exactly, while you can. So I want to, and I speak to people who I'm paying and say, have you seen an increase in cash? And a lot of people are saying, yes, I have actually. Funny you should say that, especially in the supermarket, because I don't go to the, even if there's a queue, I don't go to the automatic self-service stuff because of the biometrics and all of that rubbish. So I will definitely go to somebody who's sitting there at the supermarket, and even if there's a queue, and somebody will go, oh, you could go and use a service. No, it's all right, I want to talk to a human. And I also respect that person's got a job. And so, I want to make sure they've still got a job. That's one thing. I don't want to be photographed by the biometrics. I want to have human interaction. And I want to pay cash as well. I mean, I know I can pay cash at the other one. But I also want to ask them whether they've seen an increase in cash. Now, I was with somebody the other day who was exactly saying the same thing to me. And he said, oh, yes, no, cash I love cash, blah, blah, blah. We went for a cup of coffee and he paid for it. And he said, I'll pay for it. And he paid for it his card. And I thought, well, I would have paid it just to got the cash in. And not so long ago, the pub just down the road from me, they had a break-in. and that somebody nicked their cash register, and I happened to be passing. I said, "Oh, what's happened?" They've been broken in. Someone's nicked our cash register, and they said, "Well, it's not so important because there's not so much cash in the cash register." But they actually wanted the machine, and I said, "Oh, do you find that a lot of people are using cash in the pub, or are they paying for their card?" And they said, "No, we we much rather than pay by card." So I then got into the conversation saying, well, but cash is so important. It's such a private conversation, blah, 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 all the reasons for having it and saving it. And it was like, oh, I never really thought of it like that. And so...
I think people don't. A lot of people have never stopped to consider what the danger of going into the card-only world is. And, of course, before you know it, it won't be a card, it'll be a chip in your arm.
Yeah.
And so on. And then we're really in a world of control. Mind you, finding a cashier who's human before long, that could be hard when AI is serving you, because that's the way we're going. I mean, there's been a lot in the news about this recently. And I've been playing around with AI recently, just as a researcher, to see actually what is it capable of. And my God, it's quite scary. And we're now in a world where it will not be long, a matter of a few years, where I would say probably the majority of jobs could be done by AI. Certainly writers are out of a job, any journalist, because it can create a report just as convincing as anyone else. And the danger there is, are we not then just making a world that isn't even for human beings? Who's it for? It's not for us.
Well, that sort of begs the question about ethics and morals, doesn't it? As soon as you start using AI, because if you're reading stuff that's churned out, unless you know the bias that's in the AI,
exactly.
At least with a writer, you can say, "Oh, I read so and so in the Guardian or the Telegraph or the Times, whichever it is, whichever paper." If you read, I mean, I don't, but if you did, and you'll know their individual bias. But an AI, I mean, you may after a while get an idea, but if everything's being produced by an AI system that sort of almost pretty much comes from the same genesis, then everything's going to have that.
Absolutely. So there's a whole section in the new Heretics about this. When all knowledge is centralised, and in a way, Wikipedia, though you're no longer on it, is
I'm no longer on it.
This may be good.
I'm free.
It's free, but it's centralised knowledge, and when everything is centralised, you have to ask the question: well, who is in charge of that centralised knowledge? Who is deciding what is even knowledge? And at the moment, the program seems to be to push out anything fringe, so that is somehow dissipated and all falls away. But you're absolutely right. So when we get into an AI world, how that is programmed, what's at the bottom of all its algorithms is really going to matter. And we need to be having that conversation now,
yes,
not in 15 years' time when it's too late.
Absolutely. So what's your prediction then? Do you think... One of the things I said in a video I put out yesterday was that I think it's it's interesting, but it's actually a good time to be alive, because so much of the things that have been set up against us are beginning to crumble. And it may not be crumbling fast enough, but I think they are beginning to crumble. There is a sort of waking up of people and a big questioning of stuff. So it's interesting, but it's also quite scary and frightening, because we can see a lot of stuff being thrown at us, although partly I think it's the result of impatience by them to get us into this where they want us more quickly. So in a way, I do see it as the dying throes of a monster who's throwing all his toys out of the pram, trying to make something stick. And that's actually making people aware, because we've had so much of these things. Do you think?
I think there is a truth to that, but I still think at the moment a lot of people do just go along with what they're told in the mainstream. And because we haven't yet got to that tipping point yet, where those that question are becoming more the norm, I think that the danger is we walk into a situation without anybody really realising the consequences. And in a way, we've lived in a really interesting time. So the last sort of few decades, we've had a bit of the old world. We remember the old world, the benefits of that. We've had a few of the benefits of the new world and the technology, and think, well, that's very useful. But I think that was a little window, and now the technology is beginning to take over. And when the economy decides, actually, it's much cheaper to employ AI than actually pay human beings, and then they decide it's easier just to give all human beings an allowance in the Great Reset thinking and all that, and keep them in their little boxes out of the way, that's where the danger comes. There will always be, I think, a tier of people that won't go with that. You'll probably wind up with communities in the future that will not use AI. It'll be a bit like the Amish in America. There'll be people that will veer away from that. But probably the average person will just get sucked along with it and they'll go with it until one day they realise, yeah, they're in a world that isn't for us. Who's it for? The machines? What do they want it for? And then you're into the sci-fi world, and what happens when one day they decide we're surplus to requirements?
So do you think then there must be people like Jordan Peterson, for example, who set up the Ark, which is in his words, I believe, is the alternative to the World Economic Forum think tank of ideas, in which they're very much heading towards technocracy and instigating chips in humans and tracking and digital this, that and the other. Whereas I don't really know what the Ark is, other than it's not necessarily the opposite, but it's perhaps a more freedom-based thing. It really depends, because it's only just sort of been formed, but it's supposed to be there.
Yes, it's a bit vague at the moment, but it sounds like an interesting idea.
And we need competition with think tanks that think that they want to be a global government, because you can't, I can't see any merit of having. You could see it in this country alone, that one government has its problems. In a pandemic, it's had its problems, and whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, there was a lot of incompetence, there was a lot of backhanders going on, and special contracts and all of that, and we've seen that and all of that. And if you've got one government, you can imagine that's going to be even worse, harder to police. So you need competition at least to sort of say, well, who gets the right of anyone to tell the rest of us how we're going to live our lives? So I think that's quite good. But my point, I suppose I was going on to, surely there'll be others that will be writing another genesis of AI that is biased in a different way, which perhaps is more wholesome or has a different approach than perhaps the AI now. Because I remember watching a video in which it said, write a poem about Biden, and up comes ChatGTP with a lovely poem about Biden, the President of the United States. And then it said, write a poem about Trump, and it said, we can't possibly do that. And it refused, and it didn't write the poem. Because and it did this in a number of things, and it came out that it was all very extremely left-wing, which, if you're going to have AI, surely it's got to be balanced. It's not going to be right or left.
Well, that's the danger, is that it probably won't be balanced if we don't right now demand that it is. Because, well, there you are. That's a classic example. I mean, interestingly, if anybody's into sci-fi, read the Dune books.
Oh, yeah,
and I've been
those.
reading them recently, even though they're years old. And in the world of Dune, which is set like thousands of years in the future, they think back to a time where everybody abandoned AI. So it's already long after that. They had what was called the Butlerian Jihad, where everybody destroyed the AI. And it was literally a bit like a sort of war, like in Terminator, where they realised you had to get rid of the thinking machines, otherwise civilization could not progress. So maybe we're going to have to go through this phase where everything goes over to AI, and then what's left of us go, hang on a minute, this is insane.
Yes.
And then we have to kind of fight that and come back from that. But at the moment, we're sleepwalking absolutely into a technocracy that will be used against us by not only the they, but also the machines, who in the end will just be programmed to do what they do. And where will we fit in that? It is an issue, and I think we should be thinking about it a lot more than we are.
Yes,
Definitely.
well, no, absolutely. And it's that whole convenience thing which we fall for, hook, line and sinker. I don't have one of those devices that you can ask it to play music in your house that's constantly listening to you. It was with, I know this will sound weird, but it was with reluctance when the very first of these came in. I mean, many, many years ago, because I just thought, how lazy, you can't get up and tune the That was when you only had 3 channels before Channel 4 came. And you had to go and BBC and all of that. And it seems to me, I mean, I've been in houses where they have the lights come on and you talk to the lights, or this room here, as I said before, used to be the master bedroom. And at one point, my son and his girlfriend stayed here. I was in the still in the box room at the back, and he had one of these gadgets. I won't mention the name because it probably set it off in your house. And to turn, there's a light. It's just over there. Not all these other lights that are in here. Hang on, let me show you. Look, see, this is the studio, the real studio with proper lights. There's Andy. And up there is a light just in the ceiling. Oh, that's real.
A real light bulb.
A real
light bulb.
Absolutely. And let me just turn I have to do it off in a funny way. Let's just turn that. There we go. And the thing is, their double bed was along here. And they would just talk to this light, even the bedside light, to turn it on and turn it off. And it's that sort of laziness or that convenience that we are sleepwalking into. And it's also wonderful, isn't it? You can just talk to your light, go up a bit, 20% brighter, 20% lower, and all of this. But my worry is that all of this wonderful stuff has taken away our responsibility. And we've now, at first we were giving it the parental side of us to the government. But I think the next step is we will give the parental side of life to the AI.
Yes,
so that it's like,
and do it willingly, and
do it willingly.
That's the problem, because the conveniences, they do sell themselves to a lot of people, and they think, great, why would I not use something like this? But then they don't think about the surveillance, the fact that it's been shown over and over again. A lot of that data gets misused, it gets sold, it gets sent off, and the very fact that so many people say they're chatting away, and they realise suddenly their computer or the device is suddenly trying to sell you things that they heard you talking about. And then the next breath they say, we don't listen to your conversations, but they very clearly do.
Yes.
And some cameras even will pick up things that are in your background, and then somehow they've identified what they are, and when the next thing you go onto a website, they're trying to sell you something related to that. So it is already the case that machines and the people running the algorithms behind them know a lot about you.
It's so scary. I mean, all that stuff that people put onto social media. And I no longer do. I no longer put pictures on Instagram or on. I mean, I have done, and as I've been here for 32 years, probably it's all still relevant. But people can look at your house, or AI can just work out the square space of your house, the kind of content, everything about you, from probably all those pictures that you've ever put online, can be scanned and go, oh yes, you've got the modern this, and you've got, or ancient this, or there's your books, and build up a thing about you. And then of course it's got your facial recognition in lots of different sort of happy smiley sort of faces.
I mean, you're going to find it hard to hide your face, of course, because you're now quite well known. So
this is a rubber mask. Did you not know this is a rubber mask? I'm actually a midget who's about 600 years old from the planet.
But the point is, you're not putting the minutiae of your life on there.
No,
and some people do. I heard recently from the village where I live. Apparently, the top. And apparently there's thousands of views, right? The top thing is this lady that just goes around filming her everyday life. And apparently one of the biggest sort of hits from last week was her eating falafels in her car. And you think, A, are people that bored with their own lives they got to watch that? And B, is that wise? Because I don't think it is, ultimately.
No, absolutely. It's a conundrum, and it goes to people like yourself and other people like me on platforms like this to try and point these things out. Really, that thinking business, the old thinking. If we farm out our thinking to AI, we are then those useless eaters that we're told that we are, and that business of learning to think, and the whole school thing of how we become dumbed down through school and trained to be obedient soldiers for the state, it is something of a bit of a worry. So, people who are writing interesting and fascinating books like this, the new Heretics, understanding the conspiracy theories, polarizing the world, is very essential. And
it is, but I won't need to write it soon, because I can just get AI to write the book. Just say what I want it to say in a few sentences, and off it will go.
And will it do it?
Apparently it will. Apparently there have been some quite convincing novels written by AI as a test, and people are saying they're very good.
But ultimately, though, could I just have an AI machine that can just read it for me, and then I can, and then punch
beam
out
it into your head?
Well, no, I didn't even bother to do that. It can read it, it can then write an email to you and say, Andy, I really loved your book. That bit about blah, blah, blah was really exciting. And then, you'll go, oh, that Richard, he read that book very quickly. I only left his house 2 minutes ago and it's already, AI's read it and put an email about it.
It comes down to the same thing at the end of the day, right? That we need freedom of expression in every real way. And the world that we're going into, whereby, as you say, who controls the algorithms is going to control the world. We don't want to get to that stage. We want to here and now say, look, let's allow everybody to have an opinion about everything. As long as you're not advocating you kill somebody or racism or anything like that, right? That's already illegal. If you're just saying, look, here's an idea I feel I must share, even if you don't agree with it, the more you allow people just to put it all on the table, shine the light on it, and let everyone discuss it, you're going to have a better world than say, no, take that off. You mustn't look at that. No, but don't look at that. I'm not going to let you look at this anymore. What a stupid world that is. That's not going to get us any further forward. And that is a walking into the nightmare of what we're talking about here. We've got to say everybody should have a right to share their view. Cancel culture needs to be cancelled.
Yes.
And everything that goes with that. And I'm not saying that I don't understand why some people have fallen into cancel culture. I think some people have a genuine belief it'll make the world better, but it clearly isn't going to, and they need to wake up to that. We all need to have a nuanced conversation. And really the new Heretics is saying over and over, look, we're polarised. It helps the powers that be that we are polarised come back into the middle. Let's all have a nuanced conversation and we'll get somewhere. Because at the moment, when we're just firing arrows at each other across this huge abyss, there's not going to be a solution. And we're used and abused while that's going on, and we don't notice it because we're so caught up in the battles.
And if you go back, say, 100 years or more, people would meet in pubs and have these sort of debates, wouldn't they? And they go, oh, I don't know about that. I don't think you're talking. No, you want another pint? They could at least have a different agreement and have another pint, get on with each other, meet each other in the fields and get on with, whatever it was, bringing in the harvest, whatever they were doing. And we're very much, and I'm aware of this, doing these shows and doing my interviews with people on Zoom. It's all you're all somewhat remote. And yes, we're having the conversation and stuff, but this has been great, isn't it? I've had somebody in the studio. I can look you in the eye. You can look me in the eye. We can, there's something somewhat different about being
it is different
together. And if you have a disagreement, I mean, my sister and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. She said to me, I'm more left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn. And I thought, my God.
Wow.
But we looked after Dad when he had dementia. We got on. We would have an argument and a debate about something. And I would go, blimey, that's an interesting load of old politics that you got. And she would listen to mine and think that I was, But we could get on. I mean, luckily, as family, we were able to sort of bridge that gap because we had to, because we had this one task to do. But it's that thing about getting on and still being in people's company, which is so
we've
difficult.
fallen into the trap now, though, of if somebody says something that you don't agree with, you say, I want that opinion stopped. I don't want anybody hearing that opinion. You stop that now. And foolishly, society started to go along with that. But that is, of course, disastrous for obvious reasons. But that's the silliness of it, is that, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but equally they've got to learn to deal with it. Otherwise, they're never going to grow, and just to shut people off from difficult issues or difficult opinions, right? How are they going to grow and be human with that? They're not.
No.
And we've got to come back from that. No, you don't. You can't have people going around being nasty for the sake of it. But you can, as you say, argue a case and still get on with somebody. It actually is more than possible. And I mean, I have people that I've worked with in these areas for years. We don't all agree. Sometimes we disagree. We've managed to come through it. And some of the people from the old UFO crop circle days, we still have an email circuit and we all email each other. We've gradually realised we can disagree and it's still all right. We don't have to shut them down that day because they've disagreed with us. But that's the way things have gone. And I think we need to roll back from that because at the moment, we're heading for a world where you will not be able to express any opinion other than that which is happily sanctioned by
the George L. Orwell 1984.
Well, sadly, he got a lot of things right, I'm afraid.
Isn't that? And I mean, that's apart from the year.
Apart from the year.
Apart from the year. It wouldn't have sounded quite so good if it was 2023. But well, I don't know, 1984, 2023 may have sounded too far into the future. So we've been talking to Andy Thomas. Andy, thank you so much for coming in. 53 minutes of exciting conversation. Andy's Andy's webpage you can find at truthagenda.org. I will put the link in the description. And the new book that he has released, the new Heretics, is available everywhere, is it?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty much all the usual places that you would go to do that. And it says at the beginning here, you are Britain's most prolific author, at least one of. So what other, just to round up, what other books?
In this realm, I should add, not the most ever, but so over the years, I've written about conspiracy theories. My book Conspiracies is a great history of belief in conspiracy, whatever you think. The Truth Agenda, which the website's named after, that went far and wide about sort of 10, 12 years ago. And I've written, books about crop circles, UFOs, also history. And my book about the history of Christmas is another side to what I do, which is a fascinating topic, which maybe we'll come back at Christmas and talk about.
That would be
Christmas
good, yeah.
is so radical and people don't understand. And that's why the authorities even had to ban it in the 1600s. Everybody forgets this because it was too radical.
Oh.
So there we are. So anything like that. And also Sussex history I've written about. I was born and bred in Lewes, in East Sussex, where they have famous big bonfire night festivities, and they're all
they have the Lewis pound, don't they? Or had
they had the Lewis pound, and not enough big shops would use it to make it viable, but it lasted for a little bit. I think one or two people still use them, but of course a lot of them immediately put them on eBay. They had the Lewis pound, and they sold them on eBay, but there we go. But
but so it shows that like this, if you wanted a different
me.
currency, if you wanted a different currency from the central bank digital, it's because I know Swindon did it. Had one. I remember going down at their opening thing, Swindon, because I was in
Totnes, I believe, did it as well. I think yes.
So,
that's right.
So the whole thing has been independent currency if it came to it.
Done.
Because people are worried about that. So I think that there could be alternatives, but we better wind it up. Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's been nice, and if you've enjoyed having a guest in the studio, then I shall try and persuade more local people to come in and get some better cameras in here, so I can have a bit of vision mixing going on, so it all looks very nice. But it's great fun having somebody in the studio. So do check out the book. I shall be looking forward to reading that myself and reporting back. But in the meantime, thank you very much. I'll be back again with some more interviews coming up. The diary is filling up with lots of different things. I will be telling you, of course, about my appearance at the Glastonbury Symposium at the end of July. Starts with a J. I don't know where I am one day to the next at the moment, to be honest. But I can't remember what I'm talking about. Englishness, there's the truth-seeking and all that kind of
this.
All of this stuff. It'll be really good. It'll be really good. I've yet to write the script, but it'll be really good. So there we go. Thank you for watching, and do join me again next time. And from Andy and I, goodbye.
Cheers.